Lyla Anderson grew up immersed in the wild. Her father, Dr. Ethan Anderson, was a famed wildlife conservationist, dedicating his life to studying and protecting big cats, especially tigers. Their home wasn't a conventional one, but a research sanctuary on the edge of a vast jungle, where injured or orphaned animals were given another chance at life. Among the many creatures that found refuge there, one stood out: Rhea, a Bengal tiger cub. Lyla was just 10 when her father brought Rhea home. The tiny cub had lost her mother to poachers and was found alone in the jungle, weak and scared. From the moment their eyes met, a bond formed between Lyla and Rhea. Lyla spent her days feeding the cub, playing with her, and even sleeping beside her in a cozy corner of the sanctuary. Rhea wasn't just an animal to her. She was family. As Rhea grew, so did her wild instincts. By the time she was 2 years old, it became evident that she could no longer thrive in the sanctuary. Dr. Anderson made the painful decision to return Rhea to the wild, a heartbreaking choice for Lyla. On the day of Rhea's release, Lyla hugged the tiger tightly, whispering, "I'll never forget you." Rhea let out a soft growl, as if she understood, before vanishing into the jungle. Years passed, and Lyla often thought of Rhea. She had grown into a confident young woman, following in her father's footsteps as a wildlife biologist. One day, Dr. Anderson decided to revisit the jungle where Rhea had been released. Lyla, eager to reconnect with the animals she loved, insisted on joining him. Everyone warned her that Rhea was a wild tiger now, and it was too dangerous. She wouldn't remember Lyla. But Lyla's heart believed otherwise. Against all odds, she felt the bond they shared might still exist. What followed was a journey into the heart of the jungle, an encounter with the unknown, and a moment that would leave everyone speechless. Lyla's heart raced as their boat pushed through the dense jungle waterways. This trip was more than just a research expedition. It was a reunion she had dreamed of for years. Beside her, Dr. Anderson reviewed notes and maps, discussing the changes in the tiger population since Rhea's release with the local guides. But Lyla's mind was far from technical details. It was filled with memories of Rhea as a cub, her playful growls, the way she nuzzled into Lyla's arms, and the trust they had built. The experienced guides, trackers with decades of knowledge, briefed the group about Rhea. "She's been spotted in this territory over the years," one of them said, pointing to a map. "But remember, wild tigers are unpredictable. If we do find her, we must keep our distance." Lyla nodded, but the warning only fueled her determination. She couldn't explain it, but she felt Rhea would remember her. "I know it's risky," she admitted to her father during a quiet moment on the boat, "but I need to try." Rhea was family. Dr. Anderson placed a hand on her shoulder. "Lyla, I understand how you feel, but remember, tigers are solitary by nature. She's built a life here, one that doesn't include us anymore." Their conversation was interrupted by claw marks on a nearby tree, deep grooves indicating a dominant female tiger's presence. The guides confirmed it could be Rhea's territory. The group anchored the boat and prepared to trek through the dense jungle on foot. As they walked, the cacophony of the jungle surrounded them, birds calling, leaves rustling, distant roars echoing through the trees. Lyla felt both exhilarated and anxious, wondering with every sound if Rhea was nearby. Hours passed with no sign of the tiger. The group paused near a small clearing to rest. Dr. Anderson used the time to explain how tigers mark their territory and interpret the signs of their presence. He pointed to claw marks on trees, paw prints in the dirt, and the faint musky scent of a tiger nearby. Just as they were preparing to move again, one of the guides raised his hand, signaling for silence. Everyone froze. The air grew still, the only sound the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. Then, from the shadows, a low growl reverberated through the clearing. The growl grew louder, and the group instinctively backed away. Lyla's heart pounded, the tension in the air palpable. The tiger stepped into the clearing, her coat a radiant orange striped with deep black, her eyes gleaming with the wild intelligence of a predator. "Rhea," Lyla whispered, unable to contain herself. The tiger's ears perked at the sound of her voice. For a moment, the massive cat stood still, her gaze fixed on Lyla. The guides whispered warnings to stay back, but Lyla took a cautious step forward. Her father grabbed her arm. "Lyla, don't." "She knows me, Dad," Lyla said, her voice trembling. She slowly knelt to make herself seem less threatening. "Rhea, it's me." The tiger tilted her head, her expression almost curious. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she took a step closer. The guides gripped their tranquilizer guns tightly, ready to intervene, but Dr. Anderson signaled for them to hold off. This was Lyla's moment. Rhea let out a soft rumble, not the threatening growl of a predator, but a sound Lyla recognized. It was the same rumble Rhea had made as a cub when she was happy. Tears welled up in Lyla's eyes as the tiger moved closer, sniffing the air around her. "I told you she'd remember," Lyla said, her voice breaking with emotion. Rhea lowered her massive head, and for a brief moment their foreheads touched, a gesture so gentle and familiar that Lyla's heart swelled with joy. The years melted away, and it was as if they were back in the sanctuary, just a girl and her tiger. The moment was short-lived. A sudden rustling in the bushes startled Rhea, and she stepped back, her wild instincts taking over. Lyla understood. This was Rhea's world now, and she was only a visitor. As the tiger disappeared into the jungle, Lyla felt a bittersweet mix of emotions. She had found Rhea, and their bond was still there. But the encounter reminded her that Rhea was no longer the cub she had raised. She was now the queen of the jungle, thriving in her natural habitat. Dr. Anderson placed a comforting arm around his daughter. "You got your answer, Lyla." "She didn't forget." "She didn't," Lyla said, smiling through her tears. "And that's all I needed to know." The group made their way back to the boat, the jungle now alive with the echoes of their incredible encounter. For Lyla, the journey had been worth every risk. Rhea was more than just a memory. She was family. Just a memory? No, she was a part of her, always would be. The boat ride back to the base camp was silent, the hum of the engine blending seamlessly with the jungle's symphony. Lyla leaned against the railing, her thoughts replaying the encounter with Rhea. She revisited the moment over and over, the soft rumble, the touch of their foreheads, the undeniable connection that had endured through the years. Dr. Anderson, sitting nearby, broke the silence. "Lyla, that was extraordinary. Most wild animals wouldn't have reacted that way, even if they recognized someone from their past. It felt like she still trusted me," Lyla said, her voice filled with wonder. "But I could also see the wildness in her eyes." "She's changed." "That's the point," her father replied. "Rhea is where she's meant to be. You gave her that chance." The guides, meanwhile, were more subdued. While they had witnessed a rare connection between human and animal, they remained acutely aware of the risks. One guide, a seasoned tracker named Teo, approached Dr. Anderson. "We should tread carefully, sir. Rhea may have shown trust today, but she's still a wild tiger. We mustn't forget that." Dr. Anderson nodded. "Agreed. We'll stick to the plan, observe from a distance and avoid unnecessary risks." Back at the base camp, the group gathered around a map to plan their next steps. Teo pointed to an area further upriver where Rhea's movements had been tracked recently. "She might have cubs," he said, his tone cautious. "It's not uncommon for a tigress her age. If that's the case, we need to be even more careful." The possibility of Rhea having cubs reignited Lyla's curiosity. "Cubs? That would be amazing. It means she's not just surviving, she's thriving. Yes, Teo replied, but a mother tiger is fiercely protective. If we get too close, she won't hesitate to defend them. Despite the warning, Lyla's excitement grew. The thought of Rhea starting a family of her own was heartwarming, proof that their efforts to rehabilitate and release her had succeeded. The next morning, the team prepared for another journey into the jungle, this time heading deeper into Rhea's territory. As they loaded the boat, Teo handed Lyla a pair of binoculars. "You'll need these. If we're lucky, we might catch a glimpse of her from a safe distance." The boat ride was longer this time, the river winding through dense jungle canopies that seemed to close in around them. The air was thick with humidity, and the calls of exotic birds echoed through the trees. Lyla scanned the shoreline with her binoculars, her heart racing with anticipation. Suddenly, the boat slowed as Teo raised a hand, signaling for silence. "Tracks," he whispered, pointing to the muddy bank. The team disembarked carefully, following the fresh paw prints that led into the jungle. As they trekked through the dense foliage, the signs became more evident: clawed trees, broken branches, and the faint smell of a tiger's musk. The guides moved with precision, their eyes scanning every shadow. Lyla stayed close to her father, her excitement tempered by the gravity of the moment. Then they heard it, a soft growl, distant but unmistakable. The group froze. Teo motioned for everyone to stay low and quiet. Using his binoculars, he scanned the area ahead and then gestured for Lyla to look. Through the dense greenery, Lyla saw her, Rhea, lounging in the shade of a large tree. And she wasn't alone. 2 small cubs played nearby, their tiny bodies clumsily tumbling over each other as they explored their surroundings. Lyla's breath caught in her throat. It was a sight she would never forget. "She has cubs," Lyla whispered, her voice filled with awe. "She's a mother." Dr. Anderson smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "She's done well." The team stayed at a safe distance, watching quietly as Rhea and her cubs interacted. The tigress was relaxed, her watchful eyes scanning the area but showing no immediate concern. The cubs, oblivious to the humans, continued their playful antics. Lyla couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. Everything they had worked for, the years of care, the difficult decision to release Rhea into the wild, had led to this moment. Rhea wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Just surviving? No, she was thriving. As the sun began to set, the team knew it was time to head back. The jungle was no place to linger after dark. Before leaving, Lyla took one last look at Rhea and her cubs, whispering a silent goodbye, aware that this might be her last chance to see them. On the boat ride back, the mood was reflective. The team was in awe of what they had witnessed, yet they also understood the challenges Rhea faced. Breaking the silence, Matto spoke, his voice serious. "A tigress with cubs will attract attention, other predators, rival tigers, even poachers. We need to ensure her safety." Dr. Anderson nodded. "We'll report our findings to the sanctuary. They can increase patrols in the area." Lyla stared out at the river, her thoughts racing. Seeing Rhea again had been everything she hoped for, but it also brought a sense of responsibility. Rhea's life in the wild was fragile, and Lyla couldn't help but worry about her future. As the boat docked at the base camp, Lyla turned to her father. "Do you think we'll ever see her again?" Dr. Anderson placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Maybe, but even if we don't, we know she's where she belongs." Lyla smiled, her heart full despite the bittersweet goodbye. Rhea was more than a memory now. She was a testament to the power of trust, love, and the wild's resilience. The next morning, the team gathered early to discuss their observations. The sight of Rhea's cubs had filled everyone with hope, but Matto remained cautious. "We need to tread carefully," he reminded them. "The presence of cubs changes everything. Rhea will be more protective, and we don't want to inadvertently put her or the cubs in danger." As they packed their equipment, Lyla couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The jungle, though breathtaking, held an unpredictability that made every moment feel like the calm before a storm. Still, the chance to learn more about Rhea and her cubs outweighed any lingering fears. The group set off into the dense greenery, following the trail they had marked the previous day. This time, their movements were slower and more deliberate. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every distant call of a bird heightened their senses. The jungle was alive, and they were merely visitors. As they approached the area where they had last seen Rhea, Matto raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop. He scanned the ground and pointed to a fresh set of tracks. "She's been here recently," he said, "and she's moving quickly." "Why would she be moving so fast?" Lyla asked, concern creeping into her voice. Matto frowned. It could mean she sensed a threat. The team pressed on, their pace quickening. Lila's heart raced, her mind conjuring worst-case scenarios. What if poachers had found Rhea? What if a rival tiger threatened her cubs? She clenched her fists, determined to help if they found her in trouble. Suddenly, a guttural roar echoed through the trees, freezing everyone in place. It was Rhea, and she sounded distressed. Matto motioned for silence and led the group toward the sound, his movements swift but cautious. Lyla followed closely, her pulse pounding in her ears. As they drew closer, they saw Rhea pacing near a cluster of bushes, her ears flattened, and her tail lashing furiously. The cubs were nowhere in sight. "Something's wrong," Lyla whispered, her voice barely audible. Matto nodded. "She's agitated. We need to figure out what's going on without alarming her further." Dr. Anderson motioned for Lyla to stay back while he and Matto moved closer. Using binoculars, they scanned the area around Rhea. Then Matto spotted it. A large snake coiled near a hollow log where the cubs were hiding. The snake was massive, its scales glinting in the filtered sunlight. It posed a serious threat to the cubs, and Rhea knew it. "We have to do something," Lyla said, stepping forward. Matto shook his head. "It's too dangerous. We can't intervene directly. Rhea needs to handle this on her own." "But what if she can't?" Lyla asked, her voice breaking. Dr. Anderson placed a hand on her shoulder. "We have to trust her instincts, Lyla. This is her world." Rhea's growls grew louder, a mix of warning and challenge. The snake, sensing her presence, uncoiled slightly, its head raised in a menacing posture. The tension was palpable as predator faced predator, each sizing up the other. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, Rhea lunged at the snake. The two animals collided in a blur of motion, their growls and hisses reverberating through the jungle. The team watched in stunned silence as Rhea fought with a ferocity that left no doubt about her determination to protect her cubs. The battle was intense, the snake striking repeatedly while Rhea used her massive paws and powerful jaws to subdue it. After what felt like an eternity, Rhea delivered a final decisive blow, pinning the snake to the ground. She let out a triumphant roar, her dominance over the intruder established. Lyla exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "She did it," she said, her voice filled with awe. Matto nodded. "She's a true warrior." Rhea turned her attention to the hollow log, sniffing it cautiously before nudging it gently with her nose. Moments later, the cubs emerged, their tiny bodies trembling but unharmed. Rhea licked each of them, her growls softening into comforting rumbles. The team watched the reunion in silence, their hearts swelling with admiration for the tigress. It was a moment of raw, untamed beauty, a mother's love and determination laid bare. As the group began to retreat, giving Rhea and her cubs the space they needed, Lyla couldn't help but feel a deeper connection to the tigress. "She's incredible," she said softly. "It's like she knows exactly what she needs to do, no matter the danger." Dr. Anderson smiled. "That's the wild for you. It's brutal, but it's also beautiful." Back at the base camp, the team reflected on what they had witnessed. Matto, usually reserved, spoke up. "This changes things. Rhea's territory needs to be monitored more closely. We can't let anything happen to her or the cubs." Dr. Anderson agreed. "We'll report everything to the sanctuary and recommend increased patrols. Rhea has proven she can handle herself, but the more we can do to protect her habitat, the better." Lyla, sitting by the campfire, stared into the flames. The day's events had left her both exhilarated and humbled. Rhea's strength and resilience were a testament to the wild's power and grace, but they also highlighted the fragility of her existence. "I wish I could stay here forever," Lyla said, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Anderson chuckled. "The jungle has a way of pulling you in, but remember, our work here is to ensure it thrives even when we're not around." Lyla nodded, a sense of purpose settling over her. She had come to see Rhea, but she was leaving with so much more, a renewed commitment to protecting the wild and the creatures that called it home. As the team continued to observe Rhea and her cubs from a distance, Lyla found herself reflecting on her childhood memories with the tigress. The bond they once shared was something she never thought she'd experience again. And yet, here she was, in the heart of the jungle, witnessing the tiger she raised thriving in the wild. That night, back at camp, Lyla couldn't sleep. She sat outside her tent, gazing at the moonlight filtering through the canopy. Her thoughts were consumed by what she had seen earlier. The memory of Rhea protecting her cubs stirred something deep within her, an overwhelming mix of pride and longing. Matto, noticing Lyla's absence from the tents, joined her by the campfire. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, handing her a cup of tea. Lyla shook her head. "Seeing Rhea today brought back so much. I never thought I'd see her again, let alone like this. She's breathtaking." "She is," Matto agreed. "But remember, she's not the same tiger you knew. Years in the wild changed them. She's built for survival now." Lyla nodded, but couldn't help wondering if Rhea still remembered her. The bond they had shared wasn't something easily forgotten. "Surviving anymore. She's thriving." The encounter with the male tiger was a stark reminder of the challenges she faces every day. Yet, her ability to protect her cubs and fend off threats is a testament to her strength and adaptability. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the jungle, the team gathered around the campfire, the events of the day fresh in their minds. Dr. Anderson reflected on what they had witnessed. "Rhea's instincts are sharp, and her resilience is extraordinary. She's built to survive, and now she's teaching her cubs those same crucial skills." Matto, always the pragmatist, nodded in agreement. "She's proven she can handle threats, but we can't become complacent. The jungle is unpredictable, and we need to keep a close watch on her territory to ensure no further threats jeopardize her or the cubs." Lyla, sitting quietly by the fire, felt a mix of pride and apprehension. The day's events had rekindled her bond with Rhea, but they also underscored the harsh realities of the wild. "I just hope she stays safe," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the crackling flames. Dr. Anderson placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll do everything we can to help from a distance. Rhea has shown she can survive, and with our support, she'll continue to thrive." The next morning, the team prepared to track Rhea once more, their resolve strengthened by the knowledge that their work was crucial in safeguarding the fragile balance of life in the jungle. "Just about observation anymore," Elle argued, her voice firm. "This is about protecting a family that has already been through so much. If we don't act, we could lose them to poachers." Dr. Anderson exchanged a glance with Matto, weighing the gravity of Elalay's words. "She's right," Dr. Anderson said slowly. "While our primary role is research, we can't ignore the immediate threat. We need to collaborate with local authorities and conservation groups to set up protection measures for Ria's territory." Matto sighed, clearly torn between scientific objectivity and the undeniable urgency of the situation. "All right," he conceded, "we'll reach out to the local wildlife rangers. But we have to tread carefully. Our interference should not disrupt the natural order more than it already has." Ella nodded, a sense of determination hardening her resolve. "I'll do whatever it takes to ensure Ria and her cubs are safe. We owe them that much." The next few days were a whirlwind of coordination as the team liaised with local rangers, setting up monitoring stations and planning patrol routes to deter poachers. The camp buzzed with renewed purpose, each member driven by the shared goal of protecting the tigress they had come to admire so deeply. One afternoon, as they reviewed the newly installed camera footage, Elalay caught a glimpse of Ria with her cubs, playing near a safe stretch of the river. The sight filled her with hope. Despite the looming threats, Ria was still teaching her young ones how to thrive in their unforgiving environment. "She's a fighter," Elle murmured, her voice filled with admiration. "And so are we. Together, we'll ensure her legacy continues." Dr. Anderson smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And that, Elalay, is what true conservation is about. Not just observing life, but fighting to protect it. Just work. If we can make them believe they're always being watched, it could deter further attempts in this area." Matto sighed, clearly still worried but seeing the potential in Elalay's plan. "All right," he conceded. "But we need to be smart about this. We'll work with the local authorities to ensure our decoy traps are well placed and our surveillance discreet." The team sprang into action, setting up the decoy traps with hidden cameras around the most vulnerable areas of Ria's territory. They strategically positioned signs in the jungle, warning of surveillance and hefty penalties for poaching. The goal was to create an illusion of an omnipresent watch, enough to make any would-be poachers think twice. Over the next few days, they monitored the traps and reviewed the footage. The decoys remained untouched, and there was no sign of poachers returning. The rangers reported fewer instances of illegal activity in the region, a promising sign that the strategy was working. Meanwhile, Elle took time to reflect on the success of their efforts and the risks they had taken. She often thought of Ria and her cubs, hoping they were thriving and safe. Her bond with the tigress had driven her to action, and now it was motivating the entire team to take a more active role in conservation. One evening, as they reviewed the latest footage, they saw a heartwarming sight: Ria and her cubs playing near one of the decoy traps, completely unaware of the danger they had narrowly avoided. Smiled, her heart swelling with pride and relief. "Looks like we're not just observing anymore," Dr. Anderson said, his tone filled with admiration. "We're truly making a difference." Ella nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. "We owe it to Ria and every creature out here. This is their home, and we have to protect it." The team's efforts became a model for other conservation projects in the region, blending research with active protection to safeguard wildlife. For every sighting of Ria and her cubs was a reminder of the power of connection and the responsibility that came with it. She knew the fight wasn't over, but together they were giving the jungle a fighting chance. "Be careful," Matto cautioned. "We'll be ready if anything goes wrong." Elle nodded, her focus solely on Ria. "Stay calm, girl. This will be quick," she whispered soothingly. Gently she reached out, her fingers brushing against the paw as she grasped the thorn. Ria flinched slightly but didn't pull away. Elle took a deep breath, steadying herself. With a swift, firm motion, she pulled the thorn free. Rhea growled softly, a sound of discomfort but not aggression. Lyla immediately pressed on the paw to stem any bleeding, her voice calm and reassuring. "It's okay, Rhea. It's out now. You'll feel better soon." The tension in the air dissipated as Rhea relaxed, her eyes softening as she watched Lyla. The tiger licked her paw, testing it cautiously, then nuzzled her cubs who had come closer, sensing the moment was safe again. Lyla stood slowly, backing away to give Rhea space. She turned to her team, her face flushed with relief. "She's going to be okay. We just need to monitor her recovery from a distance." Dr. Anderson lowered the tranquilizer gun, a smile breaking through his professional demeanor. "You handled that perfectly." Matto exhaled deeply, shaking his head. "You've got nerves of steel, I'll give you that." The team watched as Rhea stood, testing her paw. Though still tender, the tiger was able to walk without the sharp pain that had previously hindered her. She led her cubs back into the jungle, her movements more confident. As the team packed up their gear and began the journey back to camp, Ella felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Rhea's trust had been a gamble that paid off, and it reinforced the special bond they shared. The jungle had given Rhea a second chance, and Ella was determined to protect that chance with everything she had. Back at camp, the team discussed their next steps, focusing on long-term strategies to ensure Rhea and her cubs continued to thrive. For every step forward was a victory, a testament to the enduring connection between humans and the wild, a connection that, with care and commitment, could lead to a brighter future for both. Suddenly, a faint movement caught Elale's attention. Through the binoculars, she spotted shadows slipping through the underbrush near the sanctuary's perimeter. Her pulse quickened. "Matto," she whispered urgently, "there's someone out there." Matto grabbed his binoculars, scanning the area Lala indicated. "I see them," he confirmed, his voice tense. "It's likely poachers." Lala's mind raced. "We need to alert the patrols and the authorities immediately. They're getting too close." Matto nodded, reaching for his radio to relay the coordinates. "This is Patrol Tower 1. We've got movement near the southern perimeter, possibly poachers. Requesting immediate backup." As Matto spoke, Elle kept her eyes fixed on the figures, her heart pounding with the urgency of the situation. The team's earlier efforts to reinforce the sanctuary had been thorough, but she knew that a single breach could endanger Rhea and her cubs. Moments later, the sound of distant vehicles and the muffled voices of the patrols confirmed that backup was on the way. However, Elale's fear didn't abate. The poachers were persistent and might act quickly. "We can't wait for them to be driven off," Elala said, standing up. "I'm going to check on Rhea." Matto grabbed her arm. You can't go out there alone. It's too dangerous." "I have to," she insisted, her eyes blazing with determination. "I know this jungle better than anyone. I can move faster and quieter on my own. Rhea needs me." Reluctantly, Matto let her go. "Be careful, Ele. We'll cover you from here and keep the patrols updated." Elle nodded and slipped down from the tower, her movements swift and purposeful. She navigated through the dense foliage, every sound heightening her awareness. Her thoughts were laser-focused on Rhea and the cubs, hoping they hadn't ventured too far from their usual resting spot. As she neared the area where she last saw Rhea, she slowed her pace, listening intently. The jungle, alive with nocturnal sounds, seemed to pulse with tension. Then, through the shadows, she caught a glimpse of Rhea. The tiger was alert, her body tense, as if she sensed the imminent danger. Elale approached cautiously, her voice low and soothing. "Rhea, it's me. We have to move now." Rhea's ears twitched, recognizing Elale's voice. Slowly, the tiger turned, her gaze meeting Ella's. With a soft, low growl, she nudged her cubs, urging them to follow her. Ella led them through a less traveled path, away from the sanctuary's edge and deeper into the protected area. Her mind raced with plans to keep them safe until the poachers were dealt with. As the first light of dawn broke through the canopy, Ella and Rhea reached a secluded clearing. It was far from the perimeter, a place where the poachers would be unlikely to find them. Ella finally allowed herself to breathe, the weight of the night lifting slightly. Back at the camp, the patrols reported the poachers had retreated, deterred by the increased presence of rangers and surveillance. Ella knew it wasn't over, but for now they had bought Rhea and her cubs more time. Returning to the sanctuary, Ella's exhaustion hit her, but the sight of Rhea and her cubs, safe and sound, filled her with renewed determination. The fight to protect them was far from over, but with every step, Ella was more resolved to keep her promise to Rhea, no matter the cost. "Down, but we need to be strategic about this," Dr. Anderson said, his voice calm but filled with urgency. Ella nodded, her jaw clenched with determination. "I'm not waiting. Every minute we waste, they get closer. Rhea and her cubs are out there, and I won't let them fall into the poachers' hands." Matto stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder, his expression hard but understanding. "I know, Ella, but rushing in without a plan will only put all of us at risk, including Rhea. Let's stay focused." Ella met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and resolve. She knew he was right, but the thought of leaving Rhea vulnerable was unbearable. The team quickly gathered their gear, and with a shared understanding of the stakes, they set off into the jungle, following the tracks of the poachers. The jungle had grown darker, the thick trees casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. Ella's senses were on high alert, every rustle of leaves making her tense. They moved in near silence, guided by the dim glow of their flashlights and the GPS signal from Rhea's collar. As they moved deeper, the tracks grew fresher, leading them to a narrow clearing. The sounds of distant voices drifted through the air, and Ella could see the flicker of flashlight beams ahead. The poachers were close. Ella signaled for the team to halt, her pulse quickening. They were dangerously close now. Through the thick undergrowth she could make out silhouettes, armed men surrounding a small area. She held her breath, peering through the foliage. In the middle of the clearing, Rhea stood tall, her golden eyes glowing fiercely in the dim light. She had positioned herself between her cubs and the poachers, growling lowly. The cubs were huddled close to her, their eyes wide with uncertainty. Ella's heart raced as she watched the scene unfold. The poachers were moving in, their greed apparent in their tense movements. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to face a force much fiercer than they anticipated. Ella gripped the tranquilizer gun tightly, the weight of the weapon a reminder of how fragile the situation was. "We can't wait any longer," she whispered. "We move now." Dr. Anderson nodded, signaling the team to split up. Ella and Matto would flank the poachers from the left, while the rest of the team created a diversion from the right. The poachers would be surrounded, and they would have no choice but to retreat. With practiced precision, the team moved into position. Ella's heart pounded in her chest, her thoughts consumed by Rhea and the cubs. They had to get out of there before the poachers realized what was happening. Ella's eyes locked onto Rhea, who remained unwavering despite the growing danger. Rhea was waiting for her, trusting her once again. Ella held her breath, knowing this was the moment. The plan was set into motion. A loud shout erupted from the right as Dr. Anderson and the others drew the poachers' attention. In that instant, Ella and Matto surged forward, moving fast and silent. Rhea let out a deep, threatening growl, and the poachers hesitated, their eyes darting between the tiger and the approaching team. Ella took her shot, firing the tranquilizer dart with pinpoint accuracy. The dart struck one of the poachers in the shoulder, and he immediately dropped to the ground, unconscious. The other poachers panicked, realizing they were surrounded. The team closed in, forcing the poachers into surrender. Within moments, the situation was under control. Lyla rushed to Rhea, who still stood protectively in front of her cubs, her eyes wary but trusting. Lyla knelt down, her hand outstretched toward the majestic tiger. "It's over, Rhea. You and your cubs are safe." Rhea, after a moment of hesitation, nudged her head toward Lyla, allowing her to approach. Lyla stroked her fur gently, relief flooding through her. The cubs, still unsure, slowly moved closer, sensing that the danger had passed. Back at the camp, the authorities were notified, and the poachers were handed over to local law enforcement. The team breathed a collective sigh of relief, but there was no time for celebration. The poachers' attack had shown just how vulnerable the sanctuary was. "Are we safe now?" Lyla asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she watched Rhea and her cubs disappear into the jungle, retreating to their safe haven. Dr. Anderson shook his head. "No, this war isn't over. But we've won this battle, and we've proven that we can protect them. We'll rebuild, reinforce, and keep fighting." Lyla nodded, her resolve hardening. "As long as there's breath in my body, I'll fight for Rhea, her cubs, and every animal in this sanctuary." The team knew the fight would continue, but tonight they had won. And in the heart of the jungle, amid the whispers of the trees, Rhea and her cubs were safe, for now. "Understood." Here's your paraphrased version of the script with a slightly altered word order, maintaining the original tone, emotion, and structure. I've made sure to avoid any violation of YouTube policies. Reluctantly, Lyla nodded, her hands trembling. "Fine, but we don't waste any time." Using a mix of GPS tracking and footprints, the team followed the trail of the poachers. The jungle was dark and ominous, the air thick with tension. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the leaves made their hearts race. After hours of tracking, they stumbled upon signs of a camp, discarded wrappers, a smoldering fire, and most chillingly, a crude cage big enough to hold a tiger. Lila's stomach twisted at the thought of Rhea and her cubs being trapped in such a hideous contraption. "They're close," Matto whispered, his voice low. "Stay sharp." The team moved forward, their senses heightened. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees. Lyla froze, scanning the shadows ahead. In the distance, she saw the glint of amber eyes. Rhea. The tiger stood protectively in front of her cubs, her body tense, ready to strike. Behind her, the poachers emerged, armed and determined. One raised a tranquilizer gun, aiming directly at Rhea. "No!" Lyla screamed, stepping into their line of sight. The poachers turned, startled by her sudden appearance. Matto and the rest of the team followed, weapons drawn. A tense standoff ensued. The jungle was dead silent, save for the heavy breathing of both humans and animals. "Leave now," Lyla commanded, her voice unwavering despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You're trespassing on protected land." The lead poacher sneered. "You think a couple of rangers are going to stop us? There's money on that tiger." Matto stepped forward, his gaze cold. "There's a prison cell with your name on it. Walk away, or we'll make sure you never leave this jungle." The poachers hesitated, their bravado faltering. And then Rhea let out a deafening roar, her presence making it clear she wouldn't back down. The cubs huddled behind her, their tiny growls mimicking their mother's defiance. The roar was the tipping point. Outnumbered and intimidated, the poachers began to retreat. One muttered, "Not worth it," before vanishing into the darkness. As the team secured the area, Lyla approached Rhea cautiously. The tiger's eyes softened when she recognized her old friend. Lyla knelt, her voice trembling with relief. "You're safe now." Rhea nudged Lyla's hand with her massive head, a gesture of gratitude and trust. The cubs peeked from behind their mother, their curiosity overcoming their fear. Lyla couldn't help but smile, tears streaming down her face. Back at the sanctuary, the team debriefed and celebrated their victory. Authorities were notified, and a full investigation into the poachers was underway. Security measures were doubled to ensure the sanctuary's safety. Lyla sat by Rhea's enclosure, watching the tiger and her cubs sleep peacefully. "We did it," she whispered. "You're safe." But deep down, Lyla knew this fight wasn't over. The sanctuary had won this battle, but the war to protect wildlife was far from finished, and she was ready for whatever came next. The sanctuary was peaceful once more, though the shadows still whispered tales of survival and courage. Yet the atmosphere was far from relaxed. The recent attack had left everyone on edge, and Lyla couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the end. Late one evening, as she reviewed surveillance footage, the radio crackled. "Lyla, you need to see this." Mateo's voice came through, urgent. She grabbed her flashlight and rushed to the observation deck where Matto and Dr. Anderson stood, their faces pale. On the screen, a group of heavily armed poachers moved silently through the jungle. "They're back," Matto said grimly, "and this time they've brought reinforcements." Lyla's heart raced. "We need to act now." The team quickly mobilized, alerting authorities and coordinating with local law enforcement, but they knew help might not arrive in time. This was their fight. "We hold them off," Lyla declared. "Rhea and her cubs are counting on us." The sanctuary's guards took their positions, night vision goggles scanning the dense jungle. Tranquilizer guns and noise deterrents were distributed. Lyla led a small group to Rhea's enclosure, determined to protect the tigers at all costs. As the poachers drew closer, the air was thick with tension. The jungle was alive with sounds, the hum of insects, the rustling of leaves, the distant calls of nocturnal animals. But beneath it all, there was an undercurrent of danger. Then a flash of movement. The first poacher appeared, his silhouette stark against the moonlit trees. He raised his weapon, but before he could fire, a blaring alarm pierced the night. The sanctuary's security system activated, flooding the area with harsh lights. "Hold your positions!" Lyla shouted. The poachers scattered, their cover blown. Some fired blindly into the air, trying to silence the alarms while others pressed forward undeterred. It was chaos at Rhea's enclosure. The tigress paced anxiously. The commotion had woken her cubs, who whimpered softly. Lyla crouched by the fence, her voice soothing. "It's okay, girl. We've got this." Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, another poacher who had bypassed the main defenses. He aimed his tranquilizer gun at Rhea, intent on shooting. "Stop!" Lyla screamed, stepping into his line of sight. The poacher hesitated, surprised by her boldness, but before he could react, a low growl rumbled behind him. He turned, his eyes widening in terror. Rhea had broken through the secondary barrier. The tiger stood tall and defiant, her golden eyes blazing with fury. With a deafening roar, she charged. The poacher dropped his weapon and fled, disappearing into the jungle. But Rhea didn't give chase. Instead, she returned to her cubs, nuzzling them reassuringly. Lyla watched in awe, her heart swelling with pride. The tigress wasn't just fighting for survival, she was fighting for her family. Meanwhile, the sanctuary's defenses held strong. The poachers, overwhelmed by alarms, lights, and the team's coordinated resistance, began retreating. But Lyla knew they couldn't let them escape. "Follow me," she called, leading a small group into the jungle. The pursuit was intense. The poachers, desperate to evade capture, left a trail of destruction behind: trampled plants, discarded equipment, and hastily abandoned weapons. But Lyla and her team were relentless. Finally, they cornered the group near the sanctuary's northern boundary. The poachers, realizing they were outmatched, raised their hands in surrender. The authorities arrived moments later and took the poachers into custody. Exhausted but victorious, Lyla returned to the sanctuary, where the team cheered as she entered. Their relief was palpable. "You did it," Matto said, admiration clear in his voice. "No," Lyla replied, glancing at Rhea. "We did it." As dawn broke, the sanctuary was bathed in golden light. The tigers, safe and sound, basked in the warmth of a new day. Lyla stood by the enclosure, her hand pressed against the glass. "You're incredible," she whispered. "Never let anyone take your freedom away." Rhea met her gaze, her eyes filled with a calm strength. It was a moment of understanding, a bond forged through shared struggle and triumph. The sanctuary became a beacon of hope, inspiring people across the globe to protect wildlife. Donations poured in, and the sanctuary expanded, helping more animals find safety. For Lyla, the fight was far from over. But as she watched Rhea and her cubs thrive, she knew it was all worth it. The tigress had taught her a powerful lesson. No matter the odds, you must always protect what you love. The sanctuary had weathered its greatest storm, emerging stronger and more united than ever. The poachers were now behind bars, their illegal network exposed and dismantled. It was a victory not just for the sanctuary, but for the countless animals whose lives would be saved as a result. As Lyla walked through the sanctuary grounds, the sun rising above the treetops, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The fight had been hard, but it had brought out the best in everyone, humans and animals alike. Rhea and her cubs thrived in the days that followed, their playful antics bringing joy to everyone who watched them. Rhea remained vigilant, her strength and grace inspiring awe in all who saw her. The sanctuary became a symbol of resilience, attracting visitors, volunteers, and supporters from all over the world. Schools organized field trips, giving children a chance to see the majestic animals up close and learn about conservation. Lyla took on a new role as an educator, sharing the sanctuary's story and Rhea's incredible journey. "She's more than a survivor," Lyla would say during her talks. "She's a reminder that we're all connected, and that every life matters." One evening, as the sanctuary staff gathered for a celebration, Matteo raised a toast to Lyla, who never gave up, and to Rhea, who showed them the true meaning of courage. Lyla smiled, her cheeks flushing. "This was a team effort," she said. "Rhea deserves most of the credit. She reminded us why we do what we do." The group clinked their glasses, their laughter echoing through the night. It was a moment of unity, a testament to the power of collective action. The sanctuary's success led to larger changes. Governments strengthened anti-poaching laws, and conservation organizations collaborated to create safer environments for endangered species. Rhea's story became a rallying cry for wildlife protection, inspiring people across the globe to take action. For Lyla, life at the sanctuary was her greatest joy. Every day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to make a difference. She often visited Rhea's enclosure, sitting quietly as the tigress watched over her cubs. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond forged through shared struggle and triumph. One day, as Lyla sat by the enclosure, she noticed Rhea standing at the edge, her golden eyes fixed on Lyla. The tigress walked closer, her movements slow and deliberate. She paused just a few feet away and lowered her head. Lyla held her breath, her heart swelling with emotion. It was as if Rhea was saying thank you. Tears filled Lyla's eyes as she whispered, "You're welcome, girl. You're welcome." The sanctuary continued to grow, becoming a place of hope for all. Rhea's cubs eventually matured and were prepared for release into the wild, where they would carry their mother's legacy forward. On the day of their release, Lyla stood at the edge of the forest, watching as the young tigers disappeared into the trees. Rhea stayed behind, her choice to remain a testament to the bond she shared with the sanctuary, and with Lyla. Years later, as Lyla reflected on her journey, she realized how much she had learned from Rhea. The tigress had taught her about resilience, love, and the importance of fighting for what you believe in. Rhea's roar echoed in her heart, a reminder that every effort, no matter how small, could make a difference. And so, the sanctuary story continued, a testament to the power of courage and compassion. Rhea's legacy lived on in the lives she touched, both human and animal. Would you fight to protect something you love, no matter the odds? Let us know in the comments below, and if Rhea's story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Together, we can make a difference.